How's this? All right, cool. Yeah, so I was supposed to start at noon, and it's like 10 minutes early, but you're all here, and why not? So I was asking, how many people actually write CSS in this? Okay, good, because this is very much a talk about CSS. But also just validation and making sure that your views look right in general. So if you're a manager or you're a programmer of JavaScript, or aura. Okay, so let's character. All right. I'm going to give this talk, and I'm going to do a great job. And if I mess up, it's okay. It's all about getting validations. Anyway, all right. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm Brian. I'm going to be talking about validating our CSS. I'm going to be talking about the Lightning design system and our Chrome extension that we made for it. So before we go any further, let's stop, take a moment, reflect on our situation. You know, I want to think about CSS deeply and some of the problems we might have with it. So doesn't CSS feel like this? You know, you make a change and you don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of people working on it and just you can't trust others. It's like Jenga, very much, very much. So if you look online, you'll see jokes like this one. Two CSS properties walk into a bar stool and a completely different bar falls over. And that captures the sentiment of the community and just working with CSS in general. We're told to, if you look way back into like computer science and over the years we've learned these things. Here's a popular book, Design Patterns from Gang of Four. Has anybody seen this book before? Yeah, so this book says to prefer composition over inheritance, as it is more malleable and easy to modify later. Okay, so there should not use inheritance if you don't have to. Here's John Ousterhout. He's a researcher at Stanford. And he says, inheritance causes the same intertwining and brittleness as observed when go-to statements are overused. That's pretty intense. We've like banished go-to statements from all of programming. So those are harsh words, talking about inheritance causing problems like that. Here's Alan Kay. He's the creator of object-oriented programming via Smalltalk, but nevertheless. And he says, here are some problems with the naive inheritance systems we use today. Confusions of taxonomy and parentage, of specialization and refinement, of parts and wholes, of semantics and pragmatics. That's coming from the creator of object-oriented programming, y'all. This is a big deal. So let's zoom over to the CSS spec, shall we? What does the W3C have to say about this? By way of cascading and inheritance, values are propagated for all properties and all elements. That's two forms of inheritance, everyone. So we've built a language around inheritance, the thing we've learned to not do. So of course, there's times and places, but we're always trying to prefer not doing this. And in CSS, we can't really get away with it, right? So no wonder it feels like this whenever you're writing CSS or making changes. So I want y'all to say this with me. All right, on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. I am stronger than my style sheet, and I can overcome its fundamental flaws. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Okay. It's just a little affirmation there for you. Feels good. So I work on the Lightning design system, and at the Lightning design system, we actually are shipping, components with CSS and markup and design guidelines. So anything from these small little buttons to like date pickers to very Salesforce specific things, right? After all, this is what Salesforce uses to build Salesforce, and you can use it too to build your own products. The exact same code. In fact, it's open source. So you can go in and you can see the code under the hood. There's a link down there. And you can actually contribute if you'd like. And we're pushing on an open source effort here now that we're kind of stabilizing. So we'd really like to have your contributions there. And there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to use the Lightning design system. It's got the look and feel, and you'll stay up to date. As we make updates, you just get those updates. So things like features like night mode, when we add that, that'll be just happening, right, for you when you when you actually change your views. And we've got cross-browser mobile accessible testing. We try very hard to make it inclusive for everyone and all devices. It's faster, it's free. Go for it, right? It's lots of reasons. And in a perfect world, we'd all be using it. It'd be great, right? No problems. Everybody's using it perfectly. And yeah, we win, and that's it. But in actuality, this happens, right? Whether it's us or someone else we know, we're working on a large team. People make mistakes. So, for instance, this person in the corner there, maybe they, put important on everything. And maybe the other person's just like, just hard code my widths and heights to pixel perfect, And then the other person's like, yes, I'm just going to put it right on the HTML itself, the style tag. I don't need no CSS. And it's very hard to figure out what's being broken and when. So let's look at a case study here of what could happen. So right now, I'm showing you a picture of Salesforce, the home screen. And it's got the drop-down search there. And if we look at this microscopic view, sorry, who's probably going to be able to see that. But in the green parts, take my word for it, we're overwriting the display property of our SLDS input. SLDS is from our design system. So what happens here is it looks fine right now. They just added a class, and it just happened to have that property, and it happened to overwrite this one little thing. It's like a needle in a haystack. And when we push out an update, depending on the block layout, that display to be inline block, which we've overwritten to inline, that's going to break this view pretty badly. So, as we evolve, what's one of the reasons you want to use the design system is you stay up to date. This will just break you. Here's another example. If you look up at that waffle thing in the top left corner, it's got that green square around it there. It's off center. Doesn't look very good. This actually happened to us a few months back, and if you look deeper into it, we'll see that we have the wrong class name on the wrong element. We just copied and pasted the markup wrong, and we just put the wrong class name on the wrong thing. And if we take it off, boom, it goes back to normal, and everybody's fine. But we had two problems, right? We were overwriting style, and that's going to break us later. And we were putting the class in the wrong place. And I should mention, when we put the class in the wrong place, it was fine until there was an update. So even though it looked fine at first, it broke later and got off center. So let's talk about solutions. Has anybody done any CSS testing before? Really? Wow. Oh, no, not looking. Automated. It exists. Can you believe it? Nobody does it. I didn't see one hand. And that's because it's like a lot of work. And it's not really, it doesn't give you much benefit. It's going to break when you make any change. And you write this giant test suite to keep all this stuff. And it doesn't tell us much. Like, stuff will still break, and it'll just say it changed on us. So we could write these tests, but we don't want to. It's a lot of work, and it's not. You also have to run it in like a headless browser, like Phantom.js or something like that. And that might not be up to date with modern browsers. They're very standard. So then you could use something like Sauce Labs and Selenium. Has anybody used that? Oh, man. Do you have, it'll just break. Just all these are just broken stuff. And it takes like 30 minutes sometimes. It's gnarly. So then you also have VRT, visual regression testing. And that means we'll take a snapshot, a screenshot of this page, remember it in some database or file system, and then the next time something changes, we'll overlay the two screenshots and get this whole beautiful sea of magenta telling us something went wrong. You added something or changed something, or you had some kind of dynamic stuff on the page, and it's good. There's a time and a place if your page cannot change at all. But most of the time, these updates are supposed to change the page. And this just tells us, it obscures what happened. It's not very great for us. So we thought long and hard, and we figured, what can we do to fix this? Because we're at the design system, we want to push updates, we want you to stay up to date, we don't want you to break. So instead of testing, we thought, well, why don't we prevent things from breaking? So then we went down the validation route. And I'm going to show you the tool we came up with. But don't worry, this isn't just a product talk. I want to talk about the techniques we used, and you can use yourself to do the same kind of thing. So here's our Chrome extension. Let's just get this full screen there. OK, so we're just looking at a normal page. You might recognize it from the workshop yesterday if you were there. And it's got a table and some things on it. That's search. And if we pop open our inspector in Chrome, we have this new SLDS validator tab. And this is something that I've installed manually beforehand. And if I go here, I see there's two things. There's SLDS usage, that is the Lightning Design System usage. Salesforce Lightning Design System is SLDS. And if I run the modules, and accessibility. So if I run them, it'll tell me I have 3 problems with usage and 1 problem with accessibility. So let's go investigate. And these are those things that are going to break us if an update happens usually, because this page looks great right now. But if we look here, we've got some different errors. And they say, listen, dynamic icons. I hovered it, and I get a little square. And it says, the SLDS icon waffle must be on an SLDS waffle container. And clearly it isn't. This isn't an SLDS icon waffle container. And if we go down to the button, we see another one here. And it says SLDS not selected, must be on a button stateful here. So we're getting to see that we put the wrong class names on the wrong things. So if I go ahead and pop open the documentation real quick, I can see that button stateful indeed has SLDS not selected defined on that. And if I look at the markup here, it says I should have an SLDS button stateful class on it. So we go back, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to the code. It shows me that does not match up. That has SLDS button and neutral and not selected, but we missed the button stateful class. And I would normally do this in my actual code, but I can do it right here. Stateful. And now if I go back, and I'm going to rerun this. Oops. Let's see. Yeah. Now I don't have that button icon anymore, which is really good, or the button problem. So I'll just go through and fix each of these issues for validation, and then I know that every piece is in the right place, and it won't break anything in the future. Now we can go down to that other problem. Remember when we were overwriting display inline on our search? Here it's got some stats on how much usage we're using from the design system and how much is custom. And we also have an error with overrides. We're overriding the SLDS tables, TH and TD's padding left on the TD here. We have this little tighter class, and it actually overrode a property from the design system. So if I head over to my elements here, whoops, and I inspect the table, I'll look at the actual TD here, and we can see, indeed, that it is overwriting our SLDS padding there. Maybe I make it a little bigger for y'all. There we go. So it's being overwritten with this. And that's all well and good right now. But let's see what happens when we push an update. Let's look at our new Salesforce look and feel coming in winter. So I'm going to comment this out and push that. Boom. Now the table's way too tight. Uh-oh, we've lost our padding. So it looked fine before, but now it looks really too much. It's too tight together. And everything else got the nice look and feel, just like it should. But this table definitely doesn't look right. So our warning told us exactly what the problem is. So let's head over to our accessibility audit. And this is very important. We want everything to be accessible for everyone. And as you build your own components on the platform, we can use our same tools to tell you if something's not accessible. So I'm going to rerun this now that I changed it to the winter look and feel. That is under active development, granted. I'll run that. And it tells us we have a contrast warning between the foreground and the background. And it tells us that we have a critical error that says that it highlights where it should be, and it says an ARIA label attribute does not exist for this input. We need a label for this input. And we can jump to the code and see, and what I'll do is just fix my label here. I'll say for SLDS, or no, so what was it saying? It's a global search 01. But if you didn't know how to do that, it has links to the docs right there for you. So this is how you would go through and use this tool to make sure everything is nice and tidy and ready to go for your own future updates. And it's going to get more and more important as our look evolves. If you haven't noticed, we're changing a lot of our look around here. So let's get back to the code. So that's the extension right there. And the extension is going to be available for download. We tried to get it on the store before today, but it's still going through the process. So it should be out soon enough. You just want to go to the Chrome extension store and search for the Lightning Design System. So now that we've seen the product and we've seen what happens, I want to take a step back and I want to share with you some of the techniques and tools that we use to make that happen. Because I've never seen anything like validating CSS before, and I think it's pretty neat, and we want to share this with the community. But before that, hold on 1 minute. I'm a good programmer, and the people will like the solution I'm going to share with them. OK, here we go. So what we came up with is something called assertion selectors. And assertion selectors are kind of a name we made up for selectors that assert something. Now, given this markup that renders that button, how might we make sure that all the classes are there and in the right place? Like all this is valid. Well, we can start with the innermost, the most specific class name. We'll say SLDS button brand. What does that go on? And that's the key, that's the relation we're defining here. What does it go on? And we'll say, well, it goes on an SLDS button. I happen to know that because I worked on the design system. But if you have your own system or your own CSS, you can define these things. And that second selector, this pairing, is what we call the assertion selector. It's a fancy term for a selector that asserts where the first one should go. And since it's a selector, we can go ahead and define an assertion selector for that selector. And that goes on a button, right? It just goes right on a button, nothing else. And button's a valid selector in CSS, and you can use any valid selector in CSS. So hopefully you can see with just these pairs, we can walk SLDS button brand to button and button to the actual button element, and there we are. We have everything accounted for and in the right place. Let's do one more. It's a little bit more complicated. This one's the tab group. I've omitted the other LIs for brevity, but we have this tab group here. And it's got a bunch of class names on it. And if we want to validate that everything is there and in its right place, we'll start with the innermost thing there, the default link. And we ask, what does that go on? And you have to think about this. This is a little bit tricky. You would say, well, maybe it goes on an A element that is the child of a default item. And that's what we write. It's valid CSS. It's just a selector. We can do that. So we've just paired it with that, and we can continue this chain along. We'll say, well, if the default item goes on an LI, that's the direct child of the default nav, and the default nav is the direct child, the UL is the direct child of default, and then that just goes on a div. And we can see that every one of these class names up there has a pair, and you can just walk. It's like the buddy system. Here we go. So everything is there, accounted for, and in its right place. And that's the system we've kind of come up with that we want to share with you. And the way we accomplish this is by putting some comments in our SAS files. So if you want to contribute to the design system, you should learn we have selectors, and we just use this restrict annotation to come up with this system. But you can implement it in any way you'd like. So let's talk about the benefits of what these do for you. So the first one is validation, of course. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. And we have validation when we're making components. This is a picture of our component composer tool that we use to create components. It tells you right there if your validation is right or wrong, and your markup is there. So before it even hits production or gets onto a build, you're seeing it while you're developing. Here's a picture of our Travis continuous integration. It runs through our validations there and gives us a report, so we never push bad code. Here, where what you just saw is the consumer, or even yourself, using the own system. So you're validating every step of the way. We're validating from the composing to the build server to the actual usage. And another benefit is you just feel good. You know, you're validating your own usage, right? You know you're all right. So markup generation is the next big benefit you would get from this. And this is pretty neat. So here's the JSON structure we get back from our cool API, and it shows us all we basically build up a rows tree and send it down. Don't worry if that's a little obscure. But what we get here is in our Explorer tool, the ability to toggle classes on and off. See that? I just turned on the button. See if it turned it off, on. And basically, since we know where the selectors go, we can just apply them to where they go, just like that. So we can say maybe we have this data table. Let's give it stripes, and let's give it borders. And they're very, very dim, but you can see we're just clicking on these selectors. We also have a visual regression tool, even though it's got a time and a place, and we use it just for our components. And we're able to generate all these possible permutations of the selectors on our components. So let's talk about CSS again for a little bit. I remember we kind of talked about how CSS is hard to work with. And what we do is kind of examine the inheritance hierarchy. We're going to flip the model on its head. So when you write CSS, you usually have some kind of idea in mind, right? You're going to write these styles, and you're making these components. And then in the HTML, which is totally separate, someone's going to use those things and put them together however they want. It's kind of like you gave this Lego set, and you're like, there you go, and someone just put them together however they wanted. So it's not very good. So what we've done is flip this on its head and made a hierarchy tree from the CSS that the HTML has to adhere to. So sometimes you want the flexibility of just interchangeable style Legos, but for our system and most design systems with components, you want to deliver how it should work. And the cool part about this is it's a tree, right? It's a tree of selectors. Each selector knows what they go on. And with any tree, we can actually see what changed and what was affected from that change. So back to that CSS problem where you make a change and it's like Jenga and you don't know what's going to happen. Well, here we know exactly what could be affected by our changes. And that gives us peace of mind, and it's kind of a game changer when you work with CSS. So I'm going to finish up here and just share a few tools with you that we use. So one is the design system parser. And this is the thing that will just go through all your comments in your system and create that rows tree for you in a JSON structure so you can go ahead and implement your own stuff. So if you have a design system or your own CSS system, you can use this tool to create that data structure. The other one is design system markup. And this one is available to you if you want to go in and just give it pairs of selectors and restricts. You don't even have to use our system. Just give us those assertion selectors. What you'll end up with is both the ability to generate markup, that is, add selectors to the markup, gives us a function, and validate that markup. It'll tell you, hey, this class wasn't added to the right element. So let's finish up by saying this together as well. I will no longer live in fear of change. I will embrace the future and validate my style. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. OK. Thank you very much.